Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Schaefer. I'm principal here at Miles and Stockbridge. Welcome. Thank you for coming. We are a 200-person law firm, general practice, everything from tax, corporate, litigation, IP. I'm in the IP group. So again, thank you for coming. And so we don't waste any more time, I'm going to introduce Lori Wiggins, who will bring up the panelists and get the show on the road. Thank you very much. Lori?
Thank you, Dave, and thank you to Miles and Stockbridge for hosting this event today. I'm Lori Wiggins. I'm the CEO of Byond. Byond is a business growth advisory. We help mid-market companies, SaaS and hardware companies, grow, scale, and acquire. We are co-hosting today's M&A panel. Without further ado, I would like to bring up the panel. Please take your seats.
Pick your poison.
Okay, I'll say here we go.
So we have Raj Kira of More Business, Pat Sheridan of Modus Create, and Stephanie Lipinski-Gallant of Miles and Stockbridge. And I'll have each of them do a brief introduction. Raj.
So my name is Raj Kara. I've built and sold a few companies, all in the SaaS software space, B2B. First one was called GovCon. It was a portal for government contractors. Then I built another one called Mailer. It's an email marketing software firm. Then did a turnaround with a company called Wealth Engine. And then I advise other companies. In the course of doing that, I've sold off divisions. I've bought companies, one company. So I can share what it's like.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Pat Sheridan, founder, CEO of Modus Create. We're a professional services firm that focuses on digital strategy, product platform engineering, and data. More broadly, this kind of new term of digital trade, helping dinosaurs become or kill unicorns, as I like to say. We service a lot of the global 2000, a lot of PE-backed firms, and what we call deep tech startups. My background is a early stage tech company. So tech guy, was at 3 venture funded companies in the 90s, little companies like Cvent that you may know as like employee, I think 40 there. I've sold 2 companies in professional services. I did a recap, Modus, a low majority recap in 2021, and we acquired 5 companies last year. So kind of sitting on that side of the table. We're about 600 people, 100% distributed firm. So excited to have this conversation today.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie.
My name is Stephanie Lipinski-Gallant. I am a tax lawyer here at Miles Stockbridge. And before you go, oh my God, tax lawyer, this is so wrong. I have no experience buying and selling companies unless you equate it to the lemonade stand I had when I was a child. We went off on vacation and I licensed it to one of the kids down the street, never got it back, which kind of says I was a failure at buying and selling my lemonade stand. I have about 30 years in tax experience. I was a tax director at a major Fortune 250 company out in California, worldwide. And I have advised clients on all the tax issues that you can possibly imagine. But what I got out of working for that company was I'm not a tax lawyer. I'm a business person who happens to focus on tax issues. And I see business through tax lens. And so one of the things, I was very honored that they asked me to come and share what knowledge I have in my comments on these things. So I look forward to listening to these 2 gentlemen and gathering wisdom from them as to their life experiences in buying and selling. It's a very robust market out there. It will continue to be. And I think opportunities are out there, but also are failures. And you need to know the difference between an opportunity and failure. So I think these guys are going to be perfectly placed to share that with us. And all I'm going to do is make tax comments. Boring, but needful. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about both sell and buy side. And we'll start with sell side questions, but it'll probably drift into buy side as well. So without further ado, we'll get started. I'll just open this question up to the panel, and that is, describe your process as to how you prepared your company to exit.
So I can jump in on that. So I think the first part is what's your cap table? So I had one co-founder. So we had a 50-50 cap table. And it also depends on what type of entity you are. So we were an S Corp in Virginia, which has its pluses and minuses, especially on the kind of exiting side. But we started off in COVID, having actually one of our employees pass away of a COVID-related heart attack. So we had no idea what was going on. We thought we need key man insurance. So we did a 409A valuation. And that was the first time we ever got a formal, like, your company would be worth X if one of you died, right? And then when we saw that number, I said, if that's what it was worth if one of us is dead, what's it worth if both of us are alive and the company's growing, right? So that was kind of a catalyst moment for us to say, wow, we didn't really realize what the company was worth. So I would start by saying, like, you know, based on what your cap table is and based on where you are in the life cycle of the business, get some formal valuation. The second thing we did, talking with our attorney, was we kind of pulled our network for PE relationships ahead of running a formal process, and basically went into negotiations to preempt a process for our firm to just say, if you were to give me a term sheet, what value would you put on the business? Knowing that folks that are looking to buy without a process are looking to get a deal. So knowing that we'd get a valuation probably higher than the 409A, but lower than an actual competitive process. And then based on that, we realized, okay, here's the kind of spreadsheets we're going to have to put together. Here's a high level of some of the dance we're going to have to do. So now let's pick an investment banker. So in my case, I looked at, and you know, the good thing about talking to investment bankers, they'll tell you exactly where the market wants to see your firm, right? Are you a cyber firm? Are you part of a commercial partner ecosystem? And here's what the valuations are based on where you sit in that general area. But I looked at what are the top 10 deals in the last, say, 5 to 10 years that were done from an investment banker's perspective in my industry sector, and what investment banks did those deals. Then we reached out to those investment banks and had them come and do their pitch, and they kind of do a soft valuation exercise on you, right, to win your business, try to get you excited about the high end of a valuation that they can get. But we took about 6 months to do that process. And I think to really pick, like, you don't want to be an investment bank's, you know, biggest deal. You don't want to be their smallest deal. You want the porridge to be kind of right about right. And that makes a difference because, you know, you want to get a certain amount of their attention, right, when you're doing the process. So I think that I can hand over to you, Raj, but that was like a very good intentional. It took a little bit longer for us to do it that way, but it really positioned us to know, you know, are we in a position to really engage a full investment banking process?
For mine, it was somewhat similar to one and different for others.
Mm-hmm.
So the very first one I did was called GovCon, and I remember we were building the company over the course of 4 or 5 years, and the market, we just saw an opportunity to have an exit, and at that time the partners and I were kind of getting tired of each other, which is also a time when you want to exit. You know, it just happens, right? So we want to go in one direction, another partner wanted to go in another direction. And so we ended up hiring a couple of investment bankers. And the thing about investment bankers, they always want to be the exclusive person. And if it's not a really large organization that has tons and tons of contacts, the smaller ones tend to have a Rolodex, a contact list now, and they just go through that relatively quickly. And that's it. If nobody's buying, then you're stuck with this exclusive agreement. So we had to have some very tough discussions with a couple of our investment bankers. Say, well, you kind of went through your list. They're like, nope, we still have an exclusive for 1 year. Every time you go find somebody that might want to buy, you need to give them to me, and then I will run the deal. We're like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right to me. So we had a really long discussion, got out of those agreements, and I think the biggest thing we did was just continue to build our network, going to events. You know, I would go to so many trade shows every week. I'd go to some kind of networking, but just to meet people and build that network. And that's actually what helped us find somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody that eventually got us a term sheet. That was one of them. But the second one, it was actually, there's a group called Mindshare. I think maybe some people from Mindshare here. It's a really strong network of tech CEOs. And so I was pretty active in that. And one person knew another company that was buying email marketing software companies. And through one connection and another connection, I ended up meeting somebody who then a couple weeks later gave us a term sheet, and then we sold. That one, it was a lifestyle business that we built over 15 years. Really enjoyed the lifestyle that it had created, and we were just time to exit because we saw consolidation happening in the industry. So your timing is really, really critical. Right now, if you're running an AI company, you will see over the next 5 years a lot of consolidation happening. The same thing happened in the email marketing space a little while back, and we saw companies buying these customer bases of software companies, email marketing software. They were buying the technology, but we knew that if we were going to just continue growing the company, we had to get either a very large insurgence of capital and then start chasing the same customers that all the other ones were chasing, or we could have a nice exit and start something new. So that's what we chose to do. So timing is really critical. Yeah.
And my point, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't mean to ask a question too early. How did you all, in that 6-month process, and it sounds like an extended process, the investment banker, how did you manage to keep your focus also on growing sales, growing the company, and not allow yourself to be distracted? Because if the sale fell through, you might have wasted the 6 months you mentioned.
So in our case, company, let's see, from, part of it is the part that is like the serendipity of the universe or the horribleness of the universe. So between 2018 and 2021, we were doubling in revenue every other year. So you have a certain kind of, so 2021 was a great year, right, to do a deal and for evaluations, et cetera. We did a couple things. The first is we put an internal deal team together. So, at the time we started the process, we were 150 people. When we exited the process 18 months later, we were 450 people. So revenue wasn't the issue, right? It was more hiring and scaling the business globally. But I did a couple things. We had an internal deal team, which was my co-founder and myself, and essentially our controller and our head of consulting. And so that was like an 8-legged animal, right? That basically was going to work 100 hours a week to spin all the plates and do the things. The second thing, I think the more valuable thing, was that, so I am in a peer mentoring group, like Vistage group, if you're familiar with that. So, personally, I think some of the best advice I got is you're wearing 3 hats when you're doing the deal. You've got your shareholder hat, right? You have your operator hat, and then you have your kind of you personally, where's your life at? So for me, my kids were getting out of high school. So it's like a really good kind of, I'm going to be an empty nester. You know what I mean? I'm kind of setting up for this next phase of my life personally. But then I through my network and through my Vistage team, put together a deal advisory board. So I had 4 folks that had done multiple exits and recaps. I took 1 point of the enterprise value of the company and said, look, this could be a year, it could be 2 years. You 4 guys are going to split this on a transaction. I'm not going to, but I'm going to get you two times a week, 2 hours a night, and you're going to have to nail your foot to this thing and help me. And that really helped me go through the investment banker selection and then the actual process, right? So that anytime I had an issue, I could just, that I wasn't familiar with, I could throw it over to them and say, when, from your experience, not conjecturing, like, did you have this issue? How did you negotiate this point? What did you do? And I think that was like a good force multiplier for doing that kind of stuff.
So in one of my companies, we were 30 people. So we didn't have a team that I could dedicate it to. It was me, a partner, and a couple of our senior people. And it is a distraction. I mean, going through due diligence is one of the biggest distractions you will ever have in running your company. It disrupts your life. Forget about going to your kid's soccer practice. It's not going to happen. It's morning to night, just answering tons of questions from the due diligence list. Not all your staff knows that that's what you're going through, right? Because if it doesn't sell, you don't want to upset the staff, right? And sometimes you can't even tell them. And so, yeah, you just got to suck it up and do it. In another company with 200 people, and so that one, we had a little bit more flexibility, as Pat was saying, that you can actually have a team of advisors and so on. But I was also in Vistage. I would always ask my advisors about, what do you think? What do does this look reasonable to you? Not necessarily go into every nitty-gritty detail, but they would give you a lot of.
Yeah, I just remember all the steak dinners, right? So I got to bury my CFO in the spreadsheet magic. I think some folks will bring on a chief strategy officer as a consultant, as a deal person, right? So it also depends on how aware is the rest of your team that you're even doing a deal. So in our case, it was a growth dynamic. So we were saying to the team, hey, in order to sustain this level of growth, we may have to acquire this capability company or that capability company. We may have to bring on a capital partner to build better supports, to support a head of sales to support growth. So we were kind of messaging for a year and a half that like, this is coming, you know, and it's a good thing for the business and allows us to open up the cap table to more of a leadership team, et cetera. Whereas on the other side, we've been acquiring some companies where they didn't message well, and it's a shock to the team. You realize like that's a threat to the ability to integrate the firm, the capability. So some of those things kind of matter, but you know, on the CEO side, on the strategy side, I don't want to be stuck doing that stuff, right? I want to be out closing deals. I want to be the face of the business. I want to be culture messaging to the team. So I would definitely recommend like bring in someone who's your spreadsheet monkey to just do all that stuff, or have that, no offense, but have that person, you know what I mean? Because you don't want to be doing that.
I hate it.
Right? You just, yeah, that's not your role. Your role is to sell the culture of your company, you know what I mean? To be positioned. And certain things we did actually that were like non-spreadsheet stuff were things like we were approaching 10 years as a firm. We actually wrote a culture book, and we actually had it as part of our diligence packet of like, this is what this company is all about. This is what remote working is all about. This is how we have this high integrated culture, even though everyone's working from home and we don't rely on offices, et cetera. And I feel like there are certain elements where in the deal, it's a deal. At the end of the day, it's like closing a deal, right? And so you want to, you know, you want to have all the buttoned up discipline on the finances, but at the end of the day, you're looking across the table saying like, can I work with these people for 5 years? Like, are they're going to understand me and my team? What kind of dynamic do I want to have with them? And to me, focusing on that part of the process was like my role, you know what I mean? And then these other parts, if you get sucked into that, then you're not really, you know, positioning, I think, because I think that's a lot that's the qualitative parts what make the best deals happen.
I think a distraction for both of you, I guess, was the process. Did your sales suffer? Did you have higher churn? Did you have a lot more customers leave? It sounds like a major time suck distraction. It's like, did you see that based on how long it was?
Yeah.
What that look?
I didn't see it. I didn't see any sales go down. We didn't have any churn. We just worked a lot of extra hours to get a lot of that work done. And you know, the interesting thing is you have to, Lloyd might be asking later about what the actual due diligence questions are. You have to be really careful about how you think through those, because it can't just be answers on a spreadsheet, which is what they'll ask for, but sometimes they actually need some more information to interpret what some of these numbers mean. And so, yeah, we really just spent a lot of time doing some thinking. I think the cultural fit that's really critical. For example, if your company is, let's say, very diverse and the buyer is not, you will have a cultural problem integrating. It will happen. And so there's lots of things you want to pay attention to as you actually make that exit, because you might be getting the bulk of the money when you sell the company, but your team will likely go. Not every case they go, but they will go. And you want to make sure that they have a safe landing too. Because, you know, small companies, your team's like your family, that you really want to take care of them. And so, you know, we had situations where one buyer said, I don't want any of your staff. I just want your customers. And I want you to stay on for 8 months. I'm like, wow, how do you communicate that to everybody? That thank you for all this work over the last several years. You're not going to have a job after the sale happens. So, you know, I looked at my role at that point. It's like, I need to make something safe for them. So structuring severances, structuring how to at least have some soft landing, helping them find new jobs kind of thing.
Yeah. I guess what I would add to that is that like, there's a huge, it depends, right, Mike? So like your company is sucking wind for 3 years. You got some IP and you want to get the hell out. That's a different process, right? You're sick of your co-founder and you're trying to buy them out. That's a different process. You're killing it, right? And you get 100 companies. So you send out, we did a quality of earnings report, which is not, we didn't have fully audited books, but we basically showed, here's the revenue trajectory, here's the depth of our customers, here's the traceability of every invoice, every deposit, like, you know, so we did this kind of stuff up front with the banker. The stressful part in that process was, and if you take your mind back to 2021, there were like a ton of deals getting done in 2021, right? So you got a presidential election, You got fears of change in capital gains tax rates, right? You got every PE dude in the world trying to, an investment banker trying to get deals done before Biden takes over, right? You have uncertainty in the global economy after. There's like a million other things that you can never plan in your business plan, but things that will affect the year in which you do, right, your deal. And so the thing for me was, like, in retrospect, so that's a frothy market for investment bankers, which means, like, how much attention you're going to get. So like Raj was saying, so when we negotiated our deal, I'm like, okay, are you the two principal guys that are going to do the deal? So then you're going to be in every meeting, right? Not your MBA, recent grad, whatever, like tape recorder dude, right? And so there were certain things where you realize as a firm, like, investment bankers, and we had great investment bankers, so it's being recorded, right? Amazing, the best investment bankers. No, but seriously, it doesn't matter. Clear-Sight Advisors, highly recommend for mid-market tech companies under 50 million. And the thing about it is, though, that they're also pitching clients, right? So in the first set of meetings you do, what I said to them is like, look, there's 3 types of deals that we could do. We've had a bunch of big strategics reach out cold through LinkedIn to acquire us. That would be very different if we sold to Accenture than if we sold to another PE firm. We've had other scaling consulting platforms that want more of a US presence, or they want more of a, capability set. And then we've had straight PE firms. And I said, I don't want to have to like pick, I'm going to go behind door number 2. I want to open all the doors. So I want to run a very long process, because I want to start with, let's take the strategics out first. Let's see if they understand the operations, the model. That would be a straight cash deal. Like, let's go through that door first and say, I don't think that feels right. Then let's go to the other door where we're a revenue accelerant to someone's existing platform. Let me see what those deals are like. So that means I'm not going to be CEO anymore, but maybe I'll run America for that. Or, you know what I mean? Like this kind of thing. And then you realize, I don't like these other platforms. Then you realize, okay, what if we're the platform? Okay, now you have 3 tiers of PE firms. You have the blue chip firms. You have folks that used to work at blue chip firms that like have a firm that's regional and maybe they got, some money. And then you have these, dog shit PE firms that are just looking for deals, no offense to the dog shit PE guys in the audience, right? But you gotta know where you're playing, right? And so, I'm a tech guy. I don't know what's a good PE firm and what's not a good PE firm until you start getting in these meetings and you realize the good guys, they have a thesis. They have operating partners. They have McKinsey or Boston supporting diligence. Like, you can immediately start to tell these guys are spending money on diligence before we even talking about a price on the company. These other firms, which are typically the regional ones, will give you a higher valuation, but they're going to bring in Uncle Joe, who's going to sit on your shoulders as a founder and then, tell you how to run the business. And so I feel like, what we started to realize is, okay, the investment bankers are like shopping us around to show, hey, this is the quality of firm that I represent. And then you realize, I don't want to do those meetings. I don't want to fly to Chicago to meet a firm that is not even in my strategic thing. But on the other side of it, what we said was, okay, but I'll take some of those meetings that help you because you're a book of business, but also help me just work the kinks out in my nervous energy of like, the first time I do the pitch, I'm telling you my entire life story, or, you know what I mean? All these things, like, set me up with those meetings first. So me and my team know how to toss the ball, know how to do the dynamic. We know we're going into it, not going to do a deal with this firm. And then you get to, shop, us around as like, hey, this is the quality of company. So I think there is that psychological piece of it, but you can waste as much time as you're willing to give. That's the problem.
Thank you.
Sorry, a little too much honesty.
No, but that's a very rich discussion, and I so appreciate that. There is one point that I wanted to go back to, and that is exiting versus acquiring, and how you work with your team or don't, right? Because when you're exiting, typically it's got to be kept under wraps. And that's another level of stress all by itself. Versus acquisition, where you're advertising it because you want everybody to be ready for it, because there's going to be certain things that they have to do and they need to be prepared for that, and you need to get them ready for that. So I think that in certain ways that selling or exiting is more stressful than acquisition.
If I can just put in something with that, and Pat said it beautifully when they decided, then they went back and they you kind of take the finance stuff and put it to the side, right? You have a small accounting, regional accounting firm, or you have something that does your returns and stuff. I have always proposed, based on my experience, that it is an investment opportunity for like a tax person, right? To come in and hand smaller companies when you're starting. It is as important as selecting somebody to do your federal returns as it is to get a tax person to come in, give you that due diligence, the bare bones minimum due diligence. Put that in place when you start doing your first return, right? And so that you work to that due diligence. And again, we're not getting so granular that it's sucking all the air out of the room, right? But there are some high level due diligence things. If you set your accounts up in a certain way, if you set your query abilities in a certain way, if you make sure that your returns are being done correctly, or at least you're making the wise decisions on compliance costs, right? Because I know you never thought you'd hear a lawyer say this, but sometimes if the law says you have to file a return and the return is going to cost you $20,000 to file the return, and you're filing a return for $2.35, right? Then you need to make a business decision as to whether you're going to do that return or not. I'm never going to advise you don't file the return because the law says you have to file the return, but that's a business decision and it needs to be framed as a business decision, right? But you need to have that due diligence in place with when you start your core basic, whatever program you pick to do your financials, right? To do your day-to-day AR, AP, whatever it is, you need to have that in place. So then when you get to the place you are, instead of start panicking and not panicking, but going, oh, this is a concern for me. You've got some tools in place. And every single year when you file your tax returns, you need to bring somebody in. And I know I do it. I know there are a lot of other tax attorneys that do this. And I specialize more in state and local and indirect taxes, but I'm also very familiar with income tax. What you do is you say, look, I'm going to pay you for 3 hours. I want you to come in here and I want you to look at this stuff, right? Tell me where my holes are. Tell me that, oh, this is a business decision. Do whatever you need to do like that, but make that investment. And if they're good attorneys, good tax people, and you can use a public accounting firm, just use somebody that actually understands the overall perspective, the national perspective on this stuff, and sometimes the international. They will be willing to do that because their hope and pray is that when you make these big deals and you get bigger, you're going to bring me along with you. It's like any investment, like the investment bankers or anything else like that. But start as you mean to go along, because I'm telling you, the due diligence checklist that these companies, you reference McKinsey, Accenture has a due diligence checklist that I have seen that is over 100 pages long. Now, are you willing to have to sit there and distract yourself to go through a 100-page Accenture due diligence checklist when if you set up some stuff correctly, you could probably cut that down to about, 45 to 50. Yeah, 45 to 50, but it's better than 100, right? So that's why I think, you guys have been in the trenches doing it. And everybody's so excited when they start, their company, they kind of push that stuff to the side. Pay me now, pay me later.
Yeah, I wish that like 5 years before we did the deal, because again, you're doing an early stage company, you're just trying to survive and make payroll. You're not thinking, in the first couple of years, well, I wasn't thinking in the first couple of years, like what's the optimal personal estate management strategy for when I exit? Should I trust set up for my kids? And I wasn't thinking when we started the company, like, oh, we'll spin some software companies out of this company, but should the IP sit in an LLC or should we have a holding company? All that stuff matters. And even like the S Corp LLC thing, because I'm in a holding company now with my former co-founder because of the tax efficiency of the thing. And I remember my CFO at the time, maybe a year or two before we did the process, saying, hey, if you move to Texas now, then you're not going to pay Virginia's piece of the deal. And I thought, my kids are in high school. Do I really want to move to Texas? I should have moved to Texas, but who cares about high school? I mean, there's only so many memories, right? Your kids, but like these are very real. You know what I mean? These are very real things. And
remote anyway, right?
Yeah, I know, but you know what I mean,
Like
like from a,
residency issues on an S corp.
yeah,
You know, I mean, that's a
Yeah.
pass-through entity and people need to be very thoughtful about that.
Yeah.
And we talked about it before. I mean, I've been at the Ritz-Carlton and you've all been there, right? Where there are 5,489 of your closest friends in that big ballroom
mhm,
because you're having some tech, awards dinner or some tech something or another. And you hear people saying, well, I'm going to set up an S corp because, my buddy said it was the best way to do it.
mhm,
And you have to think, if you're serious about your business and you want it to go where these guys have taken their businesses,
mhm.
right? You need to be as grown up as these guys have been, understanding what's my end goal, what's my exit strategy. Do I want to just meander around and have my car paid for my S corp for the next, 20 years? Or do I want to do what you guys have done, which
Yeah.
is create something, make a decision as to what you want to do with it, move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
That's part of the whole business strategy. That's core business 101, right? And I'm such a geek about core business 101. It doesn't take a whole
Yeah.
lot of money to set up core business 101.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, question.
So I understand the limitations of the LLC.
Yeah.
Entity format. But are you saying that the S corp is not, is restricted when it comes to looking at other states or other regions of the country?
Well, keep in mind, for instance, an S corp is not recognized by New Jersey or the District of Columbia.
Got it.
Right? So and remember, all of these things are entities. An S corp is an election on a C corp. You set up a C corp and then the S corp is an election you make. If you fail to make that election, right? And you'd be surprised how many companies have failed to make that election because they thought it was automatic, right? Or they want to go into DC and do a whole bunch of stuff in DC and let's move our headquarters or put an office in DC. We'll work out of there because we're looking for government contracts and stuff. All that stuff needs to be thoughtful. And remember, entities are state creatures. They are formed in states. The feds don't have other than that S corp election, the feds don't care. The feds just don't care, right? So you need to look at the state, like you said, you move to Texas early, then you don't get hit with the Virginia piece.
Yeah, the thing I was gonna say is like, when people say I sold my company, everyone assumes they bought the stock of your company, and that's not all exits, right?
Right.
Some it's an asset purchase, because I'm like, your company's a hot mess, I don't wanna buy.
Yeah.
I don't wanna own
I don't wanna
the
launch
company,
business.
I wanna own the stuff,
Yeah.
with that you can own the liabilities. So I think like, as it relates to the S Corp LLC, it's like, okay, if you're doing, and as the seller, right, you want to get capital gains effect. You don't want to be selling at an ordinary income type rate tax
Right.
bracket. So you want that equity deal. So when you're in the S Corp, then you have to do things a certain way to sell, sell the shares and get that effect. Because all these become some certain negotiating items, right? In some of these deals, like, oh, we'll do it, but we want to do it as an asset
Yeah.
purchase, or we want to do it as X, Y, and Z. And you're kind of negotiating where you're pushing the tax burden between the acquirer and the seller. We had some other, like, because we had international entities. I was going to mention a couple of things about, you reminded me as you were talking about law firms. So when we thought about law firms, and again, like, with all highest respect, like, we go, whew, it's getting hot up here. Is it hot? Yeah. So there are like law firms that we do a lot of transactional stuff in the course of our business. And so we have certain law firms that just help us in an efficient way, contracts, HR, real estate, that kind of stuff. Then you think about entity formation, capital raise, exit. That's your $1,000 an hour, right? Plus law firms, the best money you could spend, but you're only going to use them when you're doing these transformative things in the business. A lot of those firms are going to play a long game, right? So we had been building relationships with those firms for 10 years and their networks, right? And their, kind of ecosystem ahead of ever working with them. And the smart ones know that's their whole play, because you're not exiting every day, right? And so that advice kind of at the end and the structuring was like worth its weight in gold. Those are huge bills for 1 month of work, but they're the best, you know what I mean? Because you're thinking about, setting up things for success. So just kind of thinking about that in the beginning of like, you want to be curating some of these relationships. We've gotten good deal flow, right? It's like to me, the smart folks in the law firms understand that they're super connectors. They're some of the best networking people that and the ones that are really kind of business oriented they have an ecosystem you want to be part of, and by being associated with them, it increases the social capital of like, oh, you're represented by this
Yeah.
firm, you must be a good company, right?
And that's also some credibility there. I mean, if you can go into the due diligence and you cut them, let's say you're the seller, and you can cut them down, the buyer, right down with all the extraneous questions and stuff, saying, look, we've already got in place, we've accessed this firm, we use them for special projects, we use this firm, or even in a good accounting firm, throw that on the table, right? And say, I've been using these people, here's my credibility. So you'd be surprised, you can get through a bunch of those due diligence questions. If they know you have people in place that have been able to help you, you can cut this down, which cuts the law time down. I know you didn't think a lawyer would ever say this, but you can cut the hourlies down in the end
Yeah.
if you do that investment ahead of time. Yeah.
And
There's a
so we're
couple-
gonna do, go-
So there's just a couple of things I want to share on the due diligence side of things. One thing that I wished I had done, probably you discovered a couple of years before you sold, was get your hands on a due diligence checklist, even a rudimentary one, because the questions they ask you, after we went through all of this, I was like, we should have been doing this all along. Just the way you look at your business, because they slice and dice it in so many different ways that it's almost an education going through that due diligence checklist on how to run a company, especially if you're a private entity and you sell to a public company, because they have to conform to all the GAAP reporting procedures. The way they look at your total revenue, you might be looking at it as monthly cash flow. They break it down into daily revenue. There's all kinds of ways they slice and dice it. So just looking at that perspective was really interesting. Another due diligence question almost everybody asks is, how much revenue do you get from your top 10 customers? This question you have to answer very carefully, because what they're really asking is, what's the risk if we lose one of your top 10 customers? They're not going to ask you that, right? So you have to answer it in a certain way. So of course, my team goes back and, here you go, here's the answer. I'm like, we're not going to turn that in. All right. So we're gonna add narrative. So this customer has been with us 7 years, and this customer was with us 8 years, left and came back to us, and so you look at it, and so the end narrative was very little risk in churn among our top 10 customers. So you get to that stage, and suddenly now the buyer feels a little bit more comfortable, instead of, oh my God, what if we lost, this one? So there's that. There's another point I wanted to make. The best tax advice I ever got was, there's two things to do the year you sell your company. So I couldn't move to Florida and get no tax or anything. My kids were in school. So you have a lifestyle choice to make there. So is it money or is it your kids' happiness? I chose the kids, stay in the state. And so, but the thing was, if I paid my Maryland taxes that year ahead of time before the calendar year ended, it offset my federal tax, and I saved hundreds of thousands of dollars just by paying my Maryland tax before December 31st. That was the first thing. Second thing was, my wife and I would want to give some money to charity. And we're like, okay, I don't know which charity. Do you know what charity? I don't know what charity. So what we did is we set up a donor advised fund, and you can put whatever you want to donate into the DAF, take the tax credit for that year, because that is a hell of a year. You're going to have this massive tax burden that year, even if it's cap gains and not ordinary income. So what these two strategies did was dramatically reduce my taxable income for that particular calendar year. And I got to tell you, if I hadn't gotten that advice, I would have just been out an extra a lot of money, So
that's a great.
Get a couple of Porsches for that, I mean.
I believe we have two questions from the audience, one here and one here. Go ahead.
Thank you. Speaking of de-risking and the due diligence checklist, probably somebody was going to bring it up at some point, but I haven't heard. One of the current critical issues here is cyber protection, and the awareness on the part of a company that wants to be evaluated for everything being in place is not only accounting systems and tax setups, it's also CMMC cyber level certification. This is absolutely critical, and it's critical also from a legal liability standpoint, because if you're in a supply chain and you're hacked by the Chinese or anybody or some thief with regard to ransomware, and you compromise the other, your subcontractor, you compromise the prime's reputation and all, and standing and all that, you could be sued.
Do you sell cyber insurance?
No.
Okay, all right. I was gonna say, because I'm gonna answer the question very differently if that's a sales pitch. Okay, so like, my take on that would be, it depends. Because if you're a SaaS platform with customer data, right? If you operate in Europe under GDPR, like there are certain things, right? If you're a services business and you're an attack surface to get into your clients' networks, I think from a risk mitigation strategy, and like before I was at Modus, I spent 5 years at FINRA, which is a regulator over the stock market, helping them modernize stuff. And they had the smartest risk mitigation strategy for this, right? There's 4 or 5 components to it. The first is technology. So license a bunch of stuff, right? Network stuff, hardware stuff, data stuff, just license software, fine, or build stuff. The second lever for your strategy is operational control. So Sarbanes-Oxley, how you actually allow people to access networks. The third is legal, write contracts that flow risk down onto other people, right? Or prevent you from being liable for risk. And then the last lever is insurance. For everything else, get a policy, make it someone else's problem. So from our perspective, we had certain kind of operational elements that fit into that. We then also had, okay, well, how many claims have been on our cyber, right? Have we been breached? Have we leaked client IP and and so if you go through and say, well, none of these things have happened, but against these 4 dimensions of risk management, here's the software we run, here's the compliance, right? Operational controls that we deal with, GDPR, data compliance officer, whatever those things are. And again, you just you can squelch it right out. So you're not like, because you want to be running your business, not worrying about, right, attack points, at least for us anyway. Right. I don't know if was that an issue for you guys?
Look, think about what is a buyer actually buying? They're buying risk. Mm-hmm. Right? They want to see, if I put my money into you, am I going to make more money? And so they're going to ask you all kinds of stuff in that due diligence process. And cyber insurance and cyber risk will probably come up, and they're going to test your systems. They might have their tech team come in and just do all kinds of analysis. So all that's part of the whole process. So I don't look at it as something that's like separate. It's just like, this is part of due diligence.
It's organic.
Yeah, I remember having dinner with the guy who's integrating us after the deal was done, and I said, EJ, how many companies do you give offers to, or term sheets to, that do you actually acquire? He goes, about 1 in 3. 1 in 3, and so this company was on a buying spree. They had a $400 million war chest from their IPO, and they were tasked to go out and buy tons of companies. So, which, by the way, I did research on this company. So just knowing that enabled me to get a higher price. I'm happy to share a story about how you do that. So, there's all kinds of stuff you have to just be aware of.
There was another diligence thing that I was thinking of when you were talking about picking attorneys. So, we had a good attorney here in the area, and folks in New York had some really big New York firm too, really good firm. So I thought man, these guys are going to take a wire brush to us until they find something. So I said to our guys, find it first.
Yep.
What is it? Because let's say there's oh, you guys are super clean, right? You don't have any issues. So I was that's great. That means you're just going to keep digging until they find something. So what's the issue? And they're well, you have these international entities, and one's a subsidiary, but the other one, you and your co-founder own the stock. And so I was great, let them find that issue. Because then we can oh, you found something. Great. Oh, we'll fix that right away. Here's the remediation. Oh, you get to show, hey, we found something, right? And again, this is basic psychology stuff, but these folks are getting paid a ton of money to find something. So they are going to keep digging until they find something. So it's you if you know what some of your things are, maybe don't clean up every issue ahead of diligence, but know what they're going to find and be oh yeah, here's the fix.
Like you said, Raj, go in and you control the narrative to the extent that you can. Control the narrative, and that means you have to have information. That means, and the good news is I've got 2 due diligence checklists, higher level ones that we're gonna push out after this to everybody that participated. But get that and do your own due diligence internally.
Mhm.
Find out where all the warts are. You still may have warts,
Mhm.
right?
And they don't mind if you have warts.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the one thing I discovered is like, oh my God, we gotta be all clean.
Yeah.
Everything's gotta be perfect. That's the only way they're gonna buy us. And no, they don't. Like, it's like dating, there's no perfect,
If you're rich, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what you look like. Is that what you're saying, Ron? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Rob,
Oh,
what was your question?
got my question.
Great question.
Very good dialogue, guys. And let me ask you about, okay, I got it. I think I got it. So, services
Mhm.
oriented companies, SaaS-based products, that's your background.
Mhm.
And this is on the buy side. So we're looking at, in our organization, SaaS-based logistics infrastructure operations. We're looking at that infrastructure, commercial real estate purchase, so warehousing, particular type of assets that we can then build our software package into those assets, and create growth a little bit differently. But let me ask you, did you guys go through the process in one, looking at acquisitions of physical assets?
Mhm.
And then two, if so, what was some of that due diligence? And that might get into the more on the
Yeah.
DA side of even
The buy side.
Yeah.
So, so I guess, again, I hate to say it depends on a lot of these things. When we've sat with the investment bankers, and I think this is very smart way to do it. As a tech person or as an operator, you're thinking about the business and your competitive peers. Folks that think about enterprise value, right, are going to look at your industry and your business very differently. And the best question I think as an operator you can ask of equity finance people is, what's the best capital raise on exit and capital or multiple on enterprise value on exit and capital raise? Because those are the businesses I want to be in. So if you have this kind of ongoing conversation of an operator, we're building to enterprise value, we're building to something, right? And so here are the firms that are raising at the best multiples. What's the peer group? Do I want to exit for 25 times EBITDA or 2 times EBITDA or 0.8 times EBITDA or 0.8 times cash flow? Know where you're going and what your timeline is to get there. And so in our universe, part of our thesis was that, like, if you're just a straight labor arbitrage play or a straight services play and you don't have some product enablement, right, that's going to be a challenge. So we built like a bingo board type matrix that said, okay, for us to kind of take the business where it is, to where it needs to go, we want to have either open source that we control. So we're the core team, and we'll acquire different open source, or we'll acquire like product ecosystems around our big commercial partners. And we're going to build this integrated piece of value. And I feel like that, that takes your M&A strategy and splits it into almost 9 M&A strategies, right? So I think for whatever your lane is, which I don't know that I fully grok, but if there's a capital asset part of it, that might be a little hairier than things where like, I have software IP that helps enable warehouses. But you just need to rationalize the thesis, because that, I think, is the CEO. That's the story that you're like, why does this stack make sense? As opposed to bankers will say, just be a partner of this. You're like, no, why do I have to have all 4 pieces? I think that's the narrative you need to get really good at telling.
Yeah.
Right.
I've only bought one company and it was a partner of ours. And so we integrated them in. So probably not the same type of situation. If you don't mind, I would take your question and convert it into what it would look like from the sell side. So if I were a company trying to sell to somebody that's looking to have strategic buyers, I would do as much research on why they're trying to buy, because that will help give you leverage on how you negotiate through the process. If they're a tactical buyer and they're just looking for additional revenue, then you're going to get a lower valuation, right? So but if there's a strategic buyer and they're looking at technology that you've got, or maybe it's something else, maybe it's the rate of growth that they really like, something like that, you can negotiate very differently. So that's how I look at it from the other side of it. But
I appreciate it.
There's some case studies out there for Microsoft and Accenture, especially Microsoft. I mean, it is known for decades now that if they had a hole, they didn't even bother doing it from the inside. They just went and bought it, right? And grabbed it and brought it in. And there are multiple case studies that have been updated for both them and for Accenture. Accenture's another one that does that. And you can go out and kind of get an idea, I think, of,
Yeah, but that's not that true. But that's at a totally different level. We're talking about small and mid cap size. And those are great case studies. But a lot of that has cash influence and cash,
Yeah.
huge cash inputs that
They
I
break
gotta
it.
But
factor.
let's say, for example, that you were like, you had some technology that improved data efficient or energy efficiency for a data center.
Yeah.
And you were having a harder time selling it, getting market penetration that you wanted. So you spun up your own data center and showed that like, hey, we have this business, we're going to exit. We're really the software play. We'll divest but we're going to proof of case some implementation things, a strategy, because we're a little ahead of the market. So the sales traction isn't, is that what you're talking about?
What we're talking about is what we're looking at is in the world of where blue collar meets white collar. Blue collar, which is the movement of things around the warehouse, multimodal type of configuration around the port, around specifically high dense areas that's moving things. And then sophistication of technology and buying that a warehouse set that we can use. Worldwide Technology's done this in the past, and they do it great. Is using that model of the warehouse as an incubator to test your technology, whether that's robotics or whether that's the next phase of growth.
Thank you. That's a great question. The last question for the panelists are quickly, and I'll ask each of you in turn to opine, and that is, what is the one thing that people don't consider that you would ask them to consider about either buying or selling? And I guess it's a two-part question. And what's the one piece of advice that you would give somebody if they want to buy or sell? Raj?
I have two answers. One is your timing is just critical. Like you have to look at what's going on in the industry. If there's consolidation happening, you have to decide, am I going to be the bigger one and start to go acquire people, or is it time to exit so I can actually get something? I've been on many of these exit panels. I remember sitting next to one guy who said, yep, I had an offer for $18 million last year in my company. It's worth $2 million right now. This happens all the time. And so, if there's a certain number of buyers out there and they've done all their acquisitions and you're still standing, you're going to die. That's reality. So sell at the right time. The other thing is how you respond to the first offer. I think we didn't talk about that, but I think this is worth mentioning. So they're going to say, we'll buy your company for 20 million. Don't ever say, that was a lot lower than I thought. The right answer is, how did you calculate that? Because what that does is allow you to start poking holes at their process, which can then get you to increase. And I've been able to increase my sale prices by 20, 30% just with that question and then poking at other things. So just a little tip there, if that's useful.
Thanks, Raj.
Yeah, so I would say, when I started the company, the best advice I got was like, choose one or two things and be the best in the world at those things. Don't like try to trick, don't say like, I want to be 1,000-person company or I want to make $10 million, because then you're just going to run around. Like you have no focus in terms of what you're trying to do. And that's a certain kind of a Zen move, right? Like you have to kind of like what you're doing and maybe the success will come or not. The second is that once you get into it, are you doing a growth-oriented business or a lifestyle business? I think some people they think they're doing the growth-oriented business because they might be growing, but they are not structured. They're really a lifestyle business because they're not really structuring the business to go to the next level. And then when you do get to the point where you're like, okay, I want to do a change of control with the business. I think like some of the best advice I got is just like start reading Stoicism, like what is enough, and I think a lot of folks, especially folks I met, in the DC market, like you could know someone for 10 years, think they had a 9-figure exit and they made them $2 million 10 years ago that got them maybe half a beach house, and they're walking around like that's part of their ego, right? That they're was exited founder. And I kind of felt like, you have to, I think I said it in one of the other answers, like you're wearing 3 hats as the founder or the CEO. You are a shareholder in the business, so you're accountable to your family, right? And to your co-founders. You're the operator. So what do you want, right? In terms of where this business as a market opportunity could go, is this industry growing or dying? And then you personally, like, do you want to keep, like, what do you personally want to do? And I really thought about those things. Like, I'm going to run this process because this business has got to a point where I want to take it to the next level. I want to open up the cap table to the broader leadership team, and I want to go from being the best college football team to NFL, right? That's what I think the market opportunity is saying to us. You're going to grow or you're going to die. And then once we committed to the process, I didn't care if sales doubled. I didn't care if sales cut in half. I'm like, we're doing a deal. Because only the companies that do a deal, regardless of where our individual firm may be positioning, are going to be able to capitalize the amount of growth required to even stay relevant, right, in this expanding market. And you have to have the fortitude to just know, like, I'm running this process and I'm doing this deal. And so to me, that was very kind of, now it turned out that we doubled in size the year we did the deal. So that didn't hurt us from a valuation perspective, but I just kind of looked at all like that. I was like, my enough number was like, I'm just doing this deal. It's already crossed my enough number personally. And then whatever else happens is gravy and I don't care, you know? And then because you have to keep an insane amount of focus to actually get a deal done. Like you said, 90% of the deals don't get done. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
And me, I'm the pragmatic. I'm sitting there thinking, create a foundation and do your housekeeping, because at the end of the day, it will pay off in the due diligence checklist because it's coming. So create a foundation and create a good structure and frame that enables you to do that growth, or enables you to be able to sell and get the maximum amount for the sale. So I'm all about foundation and structure.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody. I know there's other questions out there. We're going to be doing more networking after this, but it is 10 o'clock. So I'm going to end the panel and thank you all for the great wisdom that you shared today. So before we end then, I wish to offer to everyone in the audience, as well as the panelists, we have a Discover business assessment, and it provides not only the current value of your business, but it shows you what the value can be if you address certain top problems. And it takes about 20 minutes to do. And it'll help you prepare your business for a successful exit or acquisition, or to grow, depending on what you want to do. So if you're interested in that, please see either Hector or myself after our panel ends. And see us if you want to set up an M&A strategy. And with that, thank you.
Thank you.